Welcome everyone to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham, and today's guest is someone who has made an incredible impact on my career. It's someone that I have, when we started this podcast, it was one of my first names of people that I just really wanted to spend an hour with, and it was better than I could have even imagined. And so because I love this man and his work so much, I'm just going to read his biography just as I may go off on tangents. And so to help me go off and not go off on tangents, I'm just going to say Geoffrey Canada is one of the most amazing people I've got a chance to meet, especially in the world of education. He's worked at the Harlem Children's Zone for over 30 years, and he's renowned around the world for his pioneering work helping children and families in Harlem as a thought leader and passionate advocate for education reform. From 1990 to 2014, Mr. Canada served as the President and Chief Executive Officer for Harlem Children's Zone, which the New York Times called one of the most ambitious social policy experiments of our time. Mr. Canada was named 2011 Time 100 list of most influential people in the world, and 2014 as one of Fortune's 50 greatest leaders in the world. The fact that we got him on the podcast is still blowing my mind. This was a great conversation. We dove into his mission and passion. We spent some time in Harlem Children's Zone, but we spent most of the time talking about his reflections on life, leadership, and even we talked about what kind of music does he listen to. It's a lot of fun. So we talked about his mission and passion. We talked about advice for people in their career to jump into the deep end of the pool, as he calls it. Some assumptions that he made building Harlem Children's Road that kind of got rocked over time. We talked about education reform, and then we dove a little bit into what are his habits and disciplines that have helped him be successful. What does he read? What are books that he's interested in, and what does he read on a daily basis? Again, what is the music that he likes? And at the end, he just gives some really sound advice for leading in the digital age. I still am on a high from this conversation. You're going to love it. Geoffrey Canada is just a really thoughtful, passionate person, and you're going to feel that the entire time. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy this conversation. Mr. Canada, I'm going to say Geoffrey. I don't know what you want me to call you.
I'm Geoffrey. I'm Geoffrey.
I know you are. I have looked up to you for so long. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for making time. The first question that we ask every guest is, who are you and what do you love about what you do?
Yeah. Geoffrey Canada, founder of the Harlem Children's Zone. I have always been passionate about trying to bring the American dream to children who grow up in places that dream seems to have disappeared. And I've always been amazed that they pay me money to do what I would do for free. I started on this mission, and people don't believe it, when I was a kid, 13, 14, 15. And I've never regretted a moment of my experience doing this work.
When you say you started on this mission, and and kind of our pre-conversation before this, I was telling you things that happened in my life that kind of developed my why for the work that I've done in my life. What happened during 13, 14, 15 to give you clarity of the work you need to do with your life?
Well, I grew up in the South Bronx in a time where it was the backdrop of urban decay when you were running for president. So if you were Jimmy Carter, you came to the South Bronx to take a picture of the abandoned houses and the rubble in the street. That was the neighborhood I grew up in. I was a lucky kid because my mother so believed. Single mom raising 4 boys by herself. Father left us when I was maybe, I think about 3, maybe 4. She invested in something which was so hugely expensive. Most of your listeners and viewers won't know what a set of encyclopedias are, but she got us a set of encyclopedias, which at that time contained all of the written information in the world between A and Z. Yep. And I went through those books and learned that the rest of the world did not look like the South Bronx. That people were growing up where they were safe, where they didn't have rodents, where there wasn't a sense of decay and despair, where the heat worked and you could get hot water, and you didn't have to put plastic over your windows to try and keep out the air. And it struck me, how do I get from here in the South Bronx to there, which was some, romanticized vision of what life would be. Again, you have to be my age to, these won't mean anything to folks to grow up in a place like Leave It to Beaver or Ozzie and Harriet. These are old TV shows, white people growing up in the suburbs. The experience that I was having, honestly, I knew we weren't going to make it out of there. I had three brothers, only two of them made it out with me. My wife had three brothers and sisters, none of them made it to 35. I knew the conditions, and we were innocent children. We hadn't done anything. I don't care what people think about left or right. We were just kids who were trying to figure out how we were going to sort of make it through the third grade or through the fifth grade or get to summertime or what we were going to get for Christmas. And all the while I was thinking, yeah, but this thing is not going to end well. And why is that in America? And so that's what shaped my thinking. If you look from the moment I graduated high school and went into college and then went to graduate school, all I tried to learn about is, how do you fix this in places like the South Bronx?
I mean, that's incredibly inspiring. I think, I didn't realize it was that far. I knew you had some learnings. I know your passion's always been there. I didn't realize it goes that deep for you. Was there pressure from your mom or other influential people in your life to pursue, quote unquote, the American dream, just get out and kind of take care of yourself?
It's fascinating. My mother knew what I wanted to do. And what she was concerned about is my connection with people. I was always able to connect with people, and people always liked me and wanted to help me. And she said to me, which scared the heck out of me, she said to me one day, Jeff, I think you have a particular talent. And if you use this talent for evil, I will disown you. Now, she told me that when I was about 14, but she was deadly serious. I was like, you're going to disown? What is it that I could do? And she was thinking that you could decide that, you're going to spend your life selling something that destroys people or doing things that manipulate people and for profit and for self-gain. And if that's what you use this talent for, I don't know that she would have disowned me. By the way, I didn't doubt her at the moment. Now that I'm grown, I probably do. So she encouraged me to go forward. But I'll tell you an interesting thing that happened, Dustin, which when I was in college, right? So I'm at Bowdoin College up in Maine. I'm a senior, and I take two classes in pure science. I'm a psych major with a sociology minor. I took a pharmacology class and a physiology class as a senior. And pharmacology I took because heroin was destroying the inner cities. I'm in school now, this is 1974. And I was trying to understand what was it about sort of the use of drugs and other things. And physiology I took because I believe there was a connection between your mind and your body and your intellect in a way that if you did certain things to your body, it could impact the way you think. Because I'm looking for the answers for how we're going to solve this problem. And the head of the biology department came in and said to me, Jeff, I just got your grades back and you got 2 A's in pure science. And he says, do you know what this means? I said, no, what does it mean? He says, it means you're smart. And I said, well, yeah, no. He said, no, but you're really smart. You're like, I could be a doctor smart. And I said, well, he said, no, I want you to go to med school. because you want to be a teacher and an educator. And why would you waste that intellect in that field? I said, no, because that's really what I want to do. And he said, no, you don't understand. You're really smart. You don't have to do that. I said, no, but that's what I really want to do. He brought in the head of the chemistry department, and they tag teamed me, saying, you don't understand the pay differential. You don't understand the prestige when you tell people you're a doctor versus a teacher, what that's going to mean. And they convinced me that I decided they were going to give me a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, books, spending money. I had to take an extra semester of science because I hadn't done all of the basic biology, chemistry I needed to do. And I was going to get a full ride through medical school. And right before I signed the document, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to spend my life around sick people. It's not like I don't like sick people, but I don't really want to spend time with them. But the pressure they put on me, honestly, to leave the profession, and it's been to me one of the problems with the work we're doing. People think you don't have to be the best and the brightest to come in and do this work. People demean the work such that almost it's an excuse. Well, how did you end up in education? Or why would you go there? So I believe, and I've said to other young people growing up, this was my passion. It wasn't because I didn't have other choices in my life. I chose this work, and I chose it against some folks who sort of thought, in quotes, you could do better. You could have a better career, a more prestigious career doing something else.
So did that strengthen your resolve when that happened? Once you realized that, you're like, oh man, these folks think I'm throwing my life away by pursuing this passion. Did that just give you this crazy fire to just run full steam ahead?
The one thing I thought and I worried about was I going to be able to get the credibility, right? Being an educator. Or should I try and become a lawyer or a doctor? And would that give me more credibility? Because I knew to do what I wanted to do, I was going to have to go out and convince people to support the work, people who didn't believe these kids could learn and, that you could tackle these kind of issues. And so I wondered about that. And, I never sort of saw a trajectory where I would go from where I started teaching in Boston to sort of creating the Harlem Children's Zone. That wasn't in my consciousness. So today it looked like, well, yeah, you could do it from an educator perspective. At that point, it was highly unlikely. And I thought I was going to probably save as many kids as I could touch, which wasn't going to be that many. But I thought if I could just save a few hundred in a career, I would be happy.
I think, one of the reasons I got into education, especially teaching urban education, was to fix the broken system. There's so many talented kids that just didn't have the opportunity to shine. And so I wanted to fix that broken system. And I think what I felt is that to do that, just like you said, could I really be on the inside and fix it? Or did I need to just look at the world and go into business? I studied finance. Should I have gone that route? What advice do you have for folks who are kind of early on in their career, or even I guess anywhere in their career they could switch, that to just jump into the deep end and pursue education and join the fight or stay in the fight?
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the things we've seen happen is some folks went on remote. They weren't going in the office. They got off the sort of the rat, race kind of thing. And, I got to go in. I'm getting in the office every day by 7:30. I'm staying till 10 o'clock at night. And it stopped. And then people said, I'm never going back to do that again. I actually found something else I want to do with my life. And I will tell folks they should take it from me. Life is short. And you get to be 69 and you realize you've lived most of your life already. And you say, how much of that time did I spend doing something I really cared about? Or how much of it did I spend trying to make a bunch of money? Or how much of it did I spend trying to impress, folks, or my parents, my grandparents, my spouse, or other folks? But it really wasn't what I wanted to do myself. It is hard. And I've tried not to push my sort of um, career goals on my children, and other folks that, why don't you go out and you get to be this? And I can show everybody what a great parent I am if you actually end up at this school or that university, because we get caught up in that kind of stuff and we think it's real. And I think the older you get in life, the more you realize, if you're blessed to live to be, in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s, that's not what's real. What's real is what you really cared about. How much good you've done in your life. How many times have you gone out of your way to show somebody that you love them, or that you care about them, or that you're willing to spend the time. The one thing that we can't buy anymore of, to spend the time with them doing something that's important. So I've become more philosophical about this. In the early part of my career, I didn't spend time with my first kids, and I've got kids, and from 50 down to 45. I was just on that thing, passionate, committed, and I said, yeah, I wish I could spend time with you, but you know what? I got to do this thing. It's funny you say, do you regret it? Yes, I do. Do I think I could have gotten here otherwise? No, I don't. The one gift my wife and I gave ourselves, we had a kid late in life, and I stopped, and I spent as much time as I could. And boy, I will tell you, I know what I'm going to be thinking about when I close my eyes for the last time. And it's not going to be all those long hours. It's going to be that I really got to spend some time watching and participating in the full life experience of one of my children. I wasn't there for the other ones. And it's funny, you just get to a place, you're looking at, how did I spend my time? I don't regret what I have tried to do for others. But I do regret to some degree that there were times when I was making personal sacrifices in my own family you know what, I think I could have had a better balance.
So to that point, so I appreciate the reflection, because so many people just stay in the race and they don't ever slow down to listen, get other advice from folks who are reflecting back, or until it's too late. One of the things that I know you did, because I've had friends work with you and around you that we could talk about later, is you have high expectations in the culture you built. People worked hard, and you were gracious, because I've heard you say this a few times. You were gracious in the sense of, you were very clear. If you're going to join this work, it's all encompassing. And if I only get you for a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, or I get a long time, we're in. Is there any kind of adjustment, amendment you would make with this reflection that you're having now?
That's such a great question, because it forces me to gain some perspective. And this is how I honestly think about it. If you're trying to do something that maybe has never been done before, you're going to end up having to pay a price. And the question is, what's the price? And is it worth it in the end? To build the Harlem Children's Zone, folks who came with me, I told them, and I would say, people would think I was kidding. I say, no, this is not for everybody. Hell yeah, no. People come out, oh, Jeff, I'd love to work for you. I say, no, you really don't want to work for me, for real. No, because I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission, and I don't want you to feel abused. Why is this guy it's Friday night and he expects me to be there Saturday, and what's going on? That I gave everybody clear warning. The closer you got to me, the more you were going to be caught up in this cycle. And the thing that allowed me to do this was, there was a group of us when I went to school in the 70s, George Caldoun, Rasuli Lewis, who joined me in this work. And they each came from the activist tradition, where they were prepared to commit their lives to change. In the old tradition of, what folks do when they decide they're going to just become full-time activists, whether you're fighting for women's rights or gay rights or that's what you're going to do. They joined me as part of my team, and they were as driven as I was. So now it's even worse, because you had other people there saying, yes, aren't you coming in on Saturday? How are we going to get this thing done? So the thing I tried not to do was to burn people out so they didn't want to stay in the work, that they got so overwhelmed by it. And I would tell folks, whether you can serve for a year or 5 years or 10 years, we're going to appreciate that. But we're trying to do something that I think is historic. And my understanding is everyone who's done that has paid a price. And we're going to have to pay a price because the work is that serious. So I know that sounds contradictory. I'm saying, boy, I wish I spent more time with my kids. But at the same time, I'm saying sometimes, would I have felt this way if I was selling detergent? And that I don't think I could say the same thing. I left. We do a peace march every year. It's named after Rasuli Lewis, who passed away. He was my age and helped build the Harlem Children's Home. And we've been marching to try and keep kids safe in Harlem. This is our 27th year in a row we've done this march. And I was saying to the folks, because we have to do it virtually, who have been here some people grew up in the organization, they're still here. I said, you know what? We tried to save them all, to keep our kids from being slaughtered. And we didn't save them all. We lost some. But I said we saved hundreds. And that's why we ended up doing what we're doing. And I feel that way about the thousands. We saved thousands. And it took this to do it. I don't regret that, even as I sort of wished we could have done it without putting in some of the hours.
Yeah, I think some people say that doesn't jive. I think what I hear from you is, again, you've felt called to go after this mission since an early age. So that was always a part of who you are and what you were. I think that just means there's some nuance to maybe I could have figured out some things here and there. It's not completely checking the track you were going down. It's just trying to find a little bit more of that nuance, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think, look, it's complicated. I think all of us are thinking about this issue. Yep. I'm fairly clear, right? I made choices early on in my career. I don't know. I think now at my age, since I know the end of the story, I could have figured out maybe I didn't have to do this to get to the end. At that point, Paul Tough wrote this book, Whatever It Takes. That was our philosophy. We got to do whatever it takes to save these kids, because then we'll figure out what works and other people can do it more efficiently, more effectively, with less wear and tear. But right now we're at that stage where we just got to make sure it gets done. I didn't know any better then, so I did what I felt like I needed to do. It's easier to do it in hindsight, but I didn't have that privilege.
That's all right. We thank you for the sacrifice. I'm sure there's plenty of folks that do. As you think, since you're in a reflective state right now, what assumptions, when you built the Harlem Children's Zone, did you have about these are the three things that if we do this well, it's going to lead to the outcomes that I'm looking for? And what, as you say, those are the assumptions you had. What were the ones that kind of got rocked in your new learnings?
Yeah. Well, one of my early assumptions was that we needed to really tackle this employment issue in our community, right? Because there were lots of folks, single moms and others, who just weren't employed. They weren't able to make enough money. You had all of these challenges. So we created an employment center, which I love. This employment center. It was a great theory, a great plan. It was one of the biggest failures of anything I had done. And it wasn't that I had diagnosed the problem wrong, right? Yep. It was when people came into our employment center, they didn't need the 12 weeks of training we were going to provide so that they had a set of skills in technology and how to do Excel and something. They need a job tomorrow. If they didn't get a job tomorrow, they were like going to lose something. And I couldn't get them a job tomorrow. They didn't have the skill. So I was sitting here and I kept running into this problem. And I said, you know what, as much as I love this program, it's not working. The data doesn't suggest that we actually have a handle on this. And so we did a couple of other things. We started the earned income tax credit to make sure we do your taxes. You in Harlem, you're in the zone, we'll do your taxes, the long form, for free. so you can claim the earned income tax credit. I'm sure they're not happy at H&R Block, which was doing the short form, but we were saying, and we've brought literally more than $100 million into our community by helping folks figure out how to claim that tax credit. And so we said, great idea, didn't work. Not as good idea, because you have to have a job to claim that, but you have to be below a certain wage requirement. So that part, I think, worked out well for us. The other sort of serious, this was one of my biggest mistakes I made. So when we started out with charter school, we had an option for opening up the school that June, which would start us in September, or we could wait a year. And I was like, no, we got to open up this June. Now, the problem was we didn't get our charter, right, until April. So then I'm looking for a superintendent through May into June. Then I'm looking for teachers. In June, I'm looking for teachers. This is like, what was I thinking? Who is looking for a job if you're a teacher in July? I mean, it does happen. I'm not saying the teachers who may be looking for a job now, that the best teachers are looking for jobs early in the academic year where they're thinking about switching. I loaded our schools with folks who just weren't able to do the job. And we tried to train and retrain and do all of this stuff to fix this problem. And the original problem was I should have waited and gave myself time to structure this deal. And for me, I felt like we couldn't wait. It was an emergency. It was a crisis. We had to deal with it right now. But you know what? We almost had to shut the school down because we weren't doing well. The scores weren't good. The last thing we needed was another lousy school. And guess who was sort of running that one? It was me. And so we had to totally readjust, take a year to rework. We didn't start the high school because the middle school wasn't strong. I promised a bunch of kids that they could go into our high school that year. I had to tell them no. It was the worst career day of my life. It really was. I was in tears that whole day telling kids and families who trusted me, you're going to have to go to another high school because you can't come to mine because we're not opening it. We opened it the next year. I still feel terrible about it today. I tell folks who are interested in this work, this is not something you should ever rush. Do it right the first time because it starts the culture right. It allows you actually to have a higher chance of success.
We talk a lot about in our organization, go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
And so that really resonates. I think it was funny. So my wife is the chief of staff and former talent director at KIPP St. Louis. And that's what they've noticed is that your most talented folks, you've got to hire early in the cycle. And so that's a tough learning. I will say, I think I heard, I'm preparing to talk to you. I've listened to a bunch of different podcasts and read your book. I feel like there's one interview about when this failure happened at your most vulnerable time that you just described, you actually invited Paul Tuff, who was, I guess, at the New York Times then, to come in and cover it. Like that seems a little sadistic to me. I love it now looking back at the strategy, but I promise you, without that story, I would have never had the maturity to be like, you know what, let's bring a writer in here to cover this failure and this apology I'm about to have to go down.
It's funny because it's hard for me to explain to folks how devastated I was. This was the biggest failure in my life. There was a whole group of kids and families who trusted me, who I was about to go down that night. They didn't know why they were coming to a meeting. Yep. All of their kids were supposed to go to high school. They thought it was going to be ours. I was going to have to tell them, not only you're not going to my high school, and it's late to get into any high school right now. So that's going to be a struggle. I was crying. I was all day. I just was in an emotional wreck. And the reason I called Paul, who I knew was writing a book, and the last thing I wanted for anybody was to really come in and know about this. But this is what I thought. This work is so hard. One day, we're going to be successful. I believe that. People were going to look in and say, yeah, that was easy for you, right? Because you had it all figured out and you actually didn't suffer any of these sort of kind of soul. This was at my very soul. I was suffering and feeling like I failed these kids. And I thought that for people who care about doing tough things, we have to learn how to live with losing, with failure, but not to let that define your efforts. And this to me was going to be, I hoped, my seminal moment. I hope it wasn't going to become a perennial moment, right? That we were going to go and I was going to suffer, and I suffered that whole time. And I suffered for weeks after that, just trying to get my kids into schools and writing letters and calling principals, asking them to accept my students. And I thought that, and now, so, you fast forward now, we've eliminated the achievement gap with our kids. Folks, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I go around there like, oh yeah, Jeff, but you had this and you had that. And I was like, no, you need to read where I was in this journey for real, to recognize that lots of folks that would have stopped him. And part of, I think, and there are other people who have stories about failure, whether you're talking about Steve Jobs or other folks. And in our business, you don't. Failure usually defines the end of that story, right? It was like, oh yeah, they were doing good, and then they failed, and that was it. Here, I wanted to say, like in other businesses, failure could help you figure out what you need to do differently to be successful. And at this point in our business, if you're going to be in this business, you are going to fail. I don't care where you are. If you're going to be trying to work in what I call the deep end of the pool, where people drown, if you're going to go in that area, you're going to have to learn how to deal with failure. And the question is, in lots of places, which I know, people accept that as the state of things. School's been failing 15. Oh yeah, but you know what? I'm in St. Louis. So what do you expect? Or yeah, this is Bed-Stuy. Come on, what? Right? You just accept that as the sort of the way things are. Those of us who go in and say, no, it doesn't have to be like that. You have to deal with the fact that, yeah, you may try really, really hard, which we did. Can I tell you how hard we tried? And we failed spectacularly, right? And then the question is, can you learn from that and get back in the game and become successful, which is what I think we did.
So I think, as I think about some people who are, whether you're a nonprofit leader, even a business leader listening to this podcast, but definitely a school leader and a district leader, it sounds like we've got to build cultures that embrace failure. But just like you said, the work within education, failure has real consequences and it feels really weighty. How do you build, or what are some of the keys to building a culture where you embrace failure while knowing that failure is scary, really scary?
That's a great question, because I was in a city talking to their superintendent of schools, and tough system, new person in there. And I was saying that if you don't build a support group among folks who have power, who will allow you to have the time to work through a failure. And one of the biggest challenges in schools is you end up not being able to change something in 2 years. You're out of there. They got the new person in, right? The new person has an idea that goes on for 3 years. That person's out. You got a new person in with new, and by then, all the people underneath them are rolling their eyes when the new person comes in with the new plan. Right? It's like, oh, here comes another one. Oh, let's see what this genius has to say. And if you can't figure out how, and this is why I say you need 5 years. You need 5 years because you're going to have failure in those first couple of years, and you're going to have the time to work that. You will not get 5 years if you are at the political whims of powers that be, that actively are able to remove you and not allow you to have the opportunity to correct your failures. And that's what we've had in education. You come in with big ideas. Everybody takes the job. I don't care where you are. You're in Cleveland, you're in Cincinnati. I don't care. You go in, they say, you know the data, your data's bad. Yeah. You can fix this. I got a plan, right? And then they ask you, so how long is your plan going to take? And you think about how long the contract is you have. I have a 2-year contract. I got to tell them I can do this in 2 years. Otherwise, I think that's where you messed up my idea. No, I'm going to need 5 years because I'm going to try some stuff. It ain't going to work. I'm going to correct it. I'm going to get better every year. And you'll be able to chart that progress, right? And it allows folks to know that this is not a short-term plan because half the people are waiting you out, right? Why should I go through this? This guy's not going to be here in 2 more years. So this system has been designed like this from the very top. You look at the turnover in superintendents and other things. We don't give folks enough time, and people don't realize you have to figure out who the power systems are and convince them that the strategy is not a 2-year strategy, that you've got a strategy, and in that strategy is self-correction. And what they can hold you accountable to is being honest about failure, transparent about what didn't work, and then clear about what you're going to do to correct those failures and the time frame it's going to take to get that done. I think each one of these is tough. Being transparent about failure is sort of giving the naysayers an opportunity to pile on and say, I told you she couldn't do it or he couldn't do it. And then getting enough time to correct those failures and having a plan in place is part of the challenge, I think, in this work. So now, here's my theory. If in the end you get the time and you don't deliver, then I think folks have to make the decisions, right? Sorry, you couldn't do it for this group of kids. Doesn't make you a bad person, but you can't do it. But we make people overpromise, they underdeliver, and then we get rid of them. I want to see a real plan, right? If you've got a culture in a school, that is not going to turn around in a year. And until you begin to turn that culture around, you're not going to be able to start moving those indicators. So you got to come up with me with a real plan that I begin to be able to measure where you are on that journey you're taking with this institution. And I think that's the same for any of these businesses that you're trying to turn around, that you have to set, first you have to diagnose the problem, and you have to have a realistic set of strategies about not just what you're going to do, but how long it's going to take you to do it if you're going to be successful. This is the one thing I will tell you. In certain businesses, you can have a fairly long-term failure rate, which I'll say that you're not profitable. If folks see a vision, that profitability will at some point be outside. So you look at the stories of Amazon and other places that just for years, they didn't produce a profit, but folks believed, right? Now, those folks are now geniuses. And you look at what happened with the stock price, but folks believed the vision was powerful enough. So we're willing to make this investment in sort of you building this institution. Until we often don't get those kinds of investors in education and social service that see the vision, understand you're going to have, I'm sure they were saying on a regular basis, what's your plan? I got your numbers for this quarter. What's your plan? How are you going to go? What does that mean? And then it was whether or not folks had enough faith in you that they will support you through these times. At some point you got to turn a profit. I'll say that. And in our business, it's the same thing. But let's not expect you to turn that within the first year or two of trying to do something extraordinary, because there's no evidence in history that that's the way any of this stuff goes.
Yeah, I think, you could tell from what we talked about earlier, I really enjoy college basketball. And I think about, the evolution, like so many of the great coaches, like take Coach K, who's retiring. Yeah. If he was only given 2 or 3 years, he could have been fired. Like today, he says, I would have been fired and we would not have Coach K. Like that to me is baffling. And I don't know how we get our society back to it, but it's encouraging for you to say, like, honestly, there's no silver bullet to this, but we've got to have time. You've got to embrace failure, but own fixing those things. Like failure is not a place you're going to live, but you're going to make mistakes as you're trying to get to the outcomes that you want. Right.
Yep. And I think education is one of the few places that failure can be accepted as a norm, right? In certain communities, in certain places, which is just so frustrating to me because every other business would have gone out of business, right? Because after a while, you have to turn a profit and you can't pay. Part of the biggest challenge I think education reformers have faced is the status quo, which wants to insist that you really can't change these systems so poor kids can make it. And part of what has happened in our business is it runs people out.
Yep.
That in the end, right? Because when you struggle and you fail, people can publicly point to it and say, yeah, you thought you were so good. Look what happened when you did this. That a lot of folks from that experience, they decide to back away. And that's why the folks who have stuck through this, the KIPS and Achievement First, there are traditional public schools that the same thing has happened. You've seen people turn around these places. I really think that they are pretty extraordinary in their leadership abilities.
Yeah, one of the words you just used was reformer. And, if you asked me before this, like if anybody came up on the street and said, who are the top education reformers, your name would be near the top of my list, as I'm sure it's on the top of many lists. When do you like being considered a reformer, and when does it make you cringe, or does it ever make you cringe?
Yeah, well, so this is one of the things I've been saying to folks. Because of COVID, I'm liable to leave my chosen profession with things being worse than when I started. That's not reform, right? That's like real failure, for real. And so I have been ringing the bell. I've been telling folks, break the glass, pull the alarm. This moment right now in our history, what's going on? Just a piece, I don't know if it was in the Times or the Journal or the Washington Post. They looked at the latest scores and said, surprise, surprise, most American kids suffered during COVID in terms of academic outcomes, measurements. Poor kids and vulnerable kids suffered an awful lot more. And the kids who were already behind suffered even worse. This is a disaster. And my challenge to the country right now is, are we prepared to call this what it is? This is a disaster. We're going to deal with the impacts of this for the next 20 years. This whole generation of kids. We've never seen a whole generation go through something like this. From pre-K right through kids who are in college. We have undermined the most vulnerable kids' platform, and it's going to impact them for the rest of their academic career, unless we do something extraordinary as Americans. Probably shouldn't frame it this way because I don't want to fall into some xenophobic kind of thing. But what I've said is, if you think of who our biggest competitor is for workers, for intellect, and for commerce, it is China. How many weeks were the Chinese kids out of school this last year?
I don't know. Not much, right?
Not much.
Yeah.
A month? Yeah. Not much. They've gained a generational advantage over us. So their fourth graders had a real fourth grade. Our fourth graders had some makeup of third grade. We as a nation need to really think this through seriously and think about the next 5 to 7 years it's going to take for us to make sure that these children, these kids who've been involved in this challenging year that's now going into year 2, by the way, yep. That we spend the time and intellectual firepower to come up with a strategy to solve this. I see this somewhat like sort of the infrastructure issue. Yeah, don't build, let those bridges keep going. You're going to end up with a problem. yes, we put a bunch of money there, but did we spend the time thinking through a strategy for real of how we're going to move this generation? So I'm concerned. And so, I mean, you asked me this question about reformer. I don't feel like a reformer. I feel like, the person who thought when they left, they were going to win the war. Now they're kind of old and they're like, no, now that we're winning the war, we need to get the old guys back because we might really lose this whole thing. That's what I feel like I am right now. We need to come up. What I was designing against, that's not this. This is something new. It includes the old stuff, but it's something new on top of it.
Is there anything that the Harlem Children's Zone is doing right now that you think is innovative for that? Or are you guys still in the phase of like, we got to get our best minds and figure this out right now?
So what we did, which I thought was pretty sort of unique, we knew that we were going to end up going remote before the schools all announced it, because we had been tracking internally. We had just been looking at the news and everything, and we knew this thing was going to shut stuff down. So we set up beforehand. We found all of our kids who didn't have devices. We got them devices. We found all of our kids who didn't have internet connection, and we got them hotspots before they were all sold out. And then we told our teachers, you're going to design a way to teach your class live, your entire class, every day. So when everybody else are having kids only with a live instructor for an hour, or a bunch of assignments, but no, our school day started before COVID at 8 and ended at 4 with a live and professional. Today, during COVID, they started at 8, they ended at 4. One of the things they did in New York City, it does make sense to me because I understand why they couldn't do it, but we could do it. If you were remote, if I had Ms. Brown as my teacher in the 4th grade and I went remote, I didn't have Ms. Brown anymore. I had a new teacher. Ms. Brown was teaching the kids who showed up in the classroom, but she wasn't teaching me. If you were at Promise Academy, our school, if you had Ms. Brown in the 4th grade, Ms. Brown was teaching her class live, and there was a camera following her all over her classroom. So everybody remote was being instructed by Ms. Brown. And she could see who was doing what, when, and which cameras were on and which were not, and kids who were sleeping when they should be awake because they weren't in class. I mean, that piece of it, was it great? No, but do we think it was better than everybody else? Yes, right? We wouldn't trade that for live instruction. But this idea that we were going to have, kids not learning from their regular teachers, kids only having an hour of live instruction and the rest, we think that was horrible for children. And there's no reason for us to go back to that.
I know we've only got a couple minutes left. I've got a couple of quick personal questions, and then I'm going to end it with the same question we end every podcast with. What are a few habits or disciplines that you have or have had in your life throughout your career that you think are critical to you being able to have the energy and focus and determination that you need to be successful every day?
Interesting. A lot of folks who know me don't know I'm retired. I was a martial arts instructor for about 25 years, and I taught Taekwondo. And the thing I used to say to people, they say, why do you love Taekwondo? Because the moment I went and began to put on my gi and began to think about the forms and the techniques and the other things, I could have cared less about what my boss had said. It just wasn't in my consciousness. I became a totally different person. So absorbed. I think people talk about golf and other things. What gets your mind so off of something that you're able to refresh? And it was the physical exercise, but it was also the mental space I went into and the emotional space I went into when I was doing, and that became a regular part of my life. And here's the interesting thing. Because I taught it, I had to show up. If I was taking a class, I didn't have to show up. I could say I'm not going Wednesday. But my students were waiting. So for 25 years, I had this discipline twice a year. Twice a week, I was going to be the martial arts instructor and working out and teaching and totally absorbed in this. And that world it's all consuming when you're in it, right? Because you don't want to sort of miss stuff. Everybody's watching you. And there's a whole group of us around the country who do it and we're involved. What to me, I think probably this is obvious, but I'll state the obvious. If there's not a way for you to find your own ability to wipe the slate clean, we think that happens when you sleep at night, dreaming helps wipe the slate clean so your brain gets a chance to refresh. My classes wipe the slate clean for me. When I left those classes, I still wasn't thinking about work. I was thinking about something, I shouldn't have done that, or so-and-so had a problem with this. And that kind of was a pressure valve release that allowed me to go for decades, feeling like I kept. Now, it's also healthy, right? And physically, it keeps your body limber and stretched and all that this yoga. It's all the good stuff that people do that involves exercise and health. So that to me is something I tell folks. If you care about being in this for the long haul, you're going to have to take care of your physical and spiritual self because they will more likely give out before your intellect does. And I've seen people with broken spirits, and I've seen people whose bodies give out on them because they have not put the same investment in that aspect of their career, because I think it's tied together, as they did with the intellectual part. So that's my own personal approach in coming at this.
That's great.
It involves diet and exercise and all the other good stuff, but that to me is not enough. Something you're so passionate about, you actually forget all the other crap in your life that's going on that keeps you up at night.
I'm about to share this because mine is because my knees have given out with basketball, so mine's become golf, and there's a lot of stereotypes around it, but to your point, it fits all the things you just described. So my wife and I may need to listen to this one portion of this talk today. Real quickly, I know your time is so precious. Intellect, keep it sharp. Who are you reading? What do you read? Do you have like a daily regimen of things that you look at? Do you have some authors that you really find fascinating right now?
So I am, Hillbilly Elegy to me is a story about poverty that if folks haven't focused on it, I think they should. Why? Because so much of the dysfunction of poverty we think about in Black and brown places, and there's huge swaths. If folks want to understand why so many places that they call flyover America feel so disconnected from the rest of the country, I think that's one of the books that it's worth it to just sort of think about and contemplate. Now, I've been a little concerned about the author who I was really following because he seems to have now wanted to become a politician, which is his right to do. The work, Angela Duckworth's work around grit is something that I think people really need to pay attention to. And I think that's really important. But for me, I read 3 newspapers every day. I read daily news because I get local. I read the New York Times. 4. I read the Washington Post and I read the Wall Street Journal. Simply because each one of them has a different editorial spin or a different focus, and all of it represents America. And so my wife knows, oh, he's down there consuming his papers. That's what's going on. But I have become increasingly concerned that you can find a place that supports your own biased thinking, which we all have, 24 hours a day. And the more we tune into those places, the more I think we lose touch with the rest of Americans. So we can't contemplate why anybody would feel the way they do, which drives us, I think, further apart in thinking about this. And so, because so much of my own the work we do at the Zone is with, my board members, they have Republicans, they have Democrats, they have folks from all over, trying to really understand and make sense out of this is something that I have spent a lot of time focused on.
No, that's really helpful, because I think to do the work well, if you're Republican and Democrat in our country, it doesn't matter. We need to solve the problem. And so
we need to solve the problem.
Everybody's coming at. One quick question before I ask our final one. I'm interviewing a gentleman actually in New York City the other day who I hope chooses to work with us, because he is an incredible young man. And I just happened to tell him, I'm like, I get a chance to talk to Geoffrey Canada this week. It's great. What would you ask him? Because he was just so engaging to talk to. And he goes, you know what? I want to know, what is he listening to? What's on his playlist? So I don't know if you're like Obama, who has like his curated playlist, and we made some jokes about what that could look like. Do you listen to music? And if so, what's kind of your go-to either artists or songs right now that like really take you into a different place?
So I have one of the most sort of eclectic music sort of appreciations. And somebody asked if I would give them my playlist. And then I told them, no, you're going to know too much about me because there are people on my playlist that if you weren't through the generations with me, both white and black, there are groups that I loved and it runs from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones to groups like Traffic that most people haven't even heard about. When I was in college, a Three Dog Night, which none of my black friends even know who they were. I loved their stuff. But mostly my stuff is soul, rhythm and blues. That's how my wife and I met. I'm older than she is, and I was listening to music one day, and she said, "What do you listen to?" And I said, "You'd never understand this. This is like back in the day." She knew all the songs. I was like, "Oh, I think I love this woman. How could she know those songs?" So that's mostly where I am. I have, I have my own rap part of when New York was the rap scene in New York before it became kind of gangster rap with Biggie and some of the others, Tupac and others. When it was Rakim, who grew up in the same town, little town out in Long Island, Wyandanch, where I graduated high school from. When Jay-Z and there were a bunch of artists then, Nas and others whose music I listened to. They lost me when they got really hardcore and some of the other stuff. So you'd see some of that and then you'd have folks. No one's ever heard of a Howlin' Wolf that's from my mother's generation, who was like a blues player. So music is a central part of my life.
Yes. But
anybody listening to my playlist would be like, why would he put that song after that song? They have nothing. They're like 50 years separating those folks. But that's who I listen to.
Yeah, my wife can't listen to my playlist because they just put them on random, and she's like, "Why do we have rap, then country, then some sort of metal, then they just can't keep up with it." So I just thought it was a really astute question that I've not, as much as I love music, I've never thought to ask it, and so I just want to give Bentley a shout out for coming up.
But there's not a day that goes by that I don't listen to probably an hour's worth of music, but never on the radio. Right. My youngest son might, but no, whatever's new right now, I won't know anything about. Lil Nas X. Everybody told me I had to see his video about the country music stuff, and then he changed up on me real fast. So
real fast.
I'll catch some of that sometimes because my wife and I, our youngest son is 23. He'll be like, "Oh, Dad, you gotta watch this." But basically, I don't listen to the radio. I got my playlist. That's what I'm listening to. It's all like, even my modern stuff is 15 years old in terms of the rap music and other stuff I'm listening to.
Well, I'm the same way, just so you know. I don't listen to a lot of on the radio. Last question. Thank you so much for your time. Just as you think about your heart right now and what you're going through, or some advice you've received, what's the best piece of advice you have for a leader in education right now?
My best advice, this is going to seem funny. My best advice is don't follow yourself in line. Don't give everybody an opinion about what it is that you're doing, and actually read and feel like you have to respond to that. The toxicity out there, I don't care what you do today. If you just decided today, hey, Jeff, I want to give like $1,000 to a homeless person, there would be 10,000 people who would be calling you all kinds of racist and other things because and if you read that stuff, it undermines, I think, your will, your commitment. It wears people down, and it's too much. This is the reason I'm like this is so. Right in the middle, when I was working full time here, all the internet stuff came on. My communications person would come in every day with a list of things about the Harlem Children's Zone for me to read. I'd be reading that list. Then I'd start reading stuff about myself. I spend all day thinking about what somebody and the boys, what are you talking about? Why would you say that about me? You don't even know me. And then I'm like, but I don't even know this, but I don't even care about this. It's so easy now to get pulled into these wars that drains, in my opinion, your energy, your focus, your time, that sometimes you think you're winning if folks online tell you you're winning. Yep. And not that you're actually delivering for children and families. And so I would tell them, limit your, sort of measurement of what you're doing by what people are writing, because the more you're doing that's going to change the system, the more negative stuff is going to be written about you. It's just the world we live in. You do something great, the people who thought you giving that $10,000 was good, you're going to be like, oh, that was great, but they're not going to write you about it. Yeah. It's going to be the other folks who are going to write about it and tell you what a horrible person you are. And so that to me is part of the challenge, because what I've seen is over my career, I've watched many good people get run out of education just from the constant scrutiny you're under. So spend the time developing your own internal strength to be able to go and do this. And the other thing I'm going to tell folks, you got to have a sense of humor. I mean, for real, people think I'm saying that as a joke. I'm not saying that as a joke. You've got to have a sense of humor. You got to realize, the folks I know who've been in the charter school movement, the attacks that have happened, the horrible things people say. I'm like, if you start taking that stuff seriously, you're going to just get out the business. Have a sense of humor. Don't even take yourself so seriously. And it will allow you to allow a lot of this stuff to roll off your back as you're focused on the work.
Well, Geoffrey, this has been an awesome, little more than an hour. So I apologize if I made you late for your next meeting, but
it's all good.
I have been looking forward to this day for so long. And like I said, I just appreciate you making time and continuing to be in the fight. Thank you for encouraging us to stay in the fight and to continue to follow your example.
Thanks, Dustin. It's been a blast, as you could probably tell.
Oh, this has been awesome. I appreciate you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, you also now. Bye now.
Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.